good evening and a very warm welcome to you. Thank you so much for joining us here on an economic forum where we discuss all things relating to the economy. My name is Farai Gwaze. Feel free to also be part of the discussion. Send us your questions, comments, and your contributions on our WhatsApp platform, and also follow us on our social media at Economic Forum Zimbabwe. Tonight on Economic Forum, we'll be looking at the significance of medical aid, or access to medical aid rather, during COVID. And to help me unpack a few of those issues to be discussed, I'm joined by Mr. Joseph NGANI, who is an independent medical aid consultant. Mr. NGANI, thank you so much for joining us today.
Thank you, Farai, for having me, and it's good to be back, and hopefully we'll be able to share some insights on this pertinent issue.
Right. Now, briefly share with us the function of medical aid, but more importantly, in context to Zimbabwe.
The function of medical aid, in essence, is to help members cushion themselves in the event of an unforeseen medical emergency. Okay, we are saying here you want to be in control of an unforeseen circumstance. How? By putting some resources aside, which can then help you mitigate against the effects of being in a medical distress. Right. So, in essence, medical aid is a concept where people share a burden of healthcare, and on the flip side, they also share the benefits of being on a medical aid scheme. And it's also a function of managing a risk. Right. You know, you don't want to be exposed when you're feeling unwell and you have to deal with financial issues. Because on one end, you're trying to address a health-related concern, but now coupled with a financial-related concern, it becomes a double punch to any individual. Right. So you rather want to fight one devil at a time. Right. What am I suffering from? I've got my financial side of the story taken care of. So in essence, medical aid is there to cater for any unforeseen medical emergencies. Right. But again, we get people who then misconstrue medical aid as a fund or as a function that meets all your entire costs.
Right.
But the original concept of medical aid is to meet you somewhere in terms of a healthcare cost.
Right.
Yes. Right. Yeah. So it's a myth that medical aid actually covers 100%. Mm-hmm. Yes, accepted because of commercial dynamics where medical aid societies seek to outdo each other.
Sure.
But in essence, medical aid is meant to cover you some distance in terms of meeting your healthcare costs. Well, there are many reasons that are given for that. Mm-hmm. Because some of the reasons could be trying to curb abuse of medical aid funds if it were to cover you 100%.
Right.
So medical aid then comes and meets you some way in terms of healthcare costs. That's why we have an issue to do with core payments and shortfalls. They are just meant to curtail any abuse of medical aid.
Right.
So in short, yes, that's the concept of medical aid. Is there to mitigate against your medical expenses as well as to manage your risk in the case of a medical emergency.
Right. So let's look closer at the access to medical aid in Zimbabwe. Where do we stand at the moment?
We are in a very difficult situation, honestly, as a nation. Right now, many reasons for that. Currently, we are sitting at about 10% of the Zimbabwean population covered on some form of medical aid.
Right.
So what it means is, as a nation,
10%?
10%, only 10%, right? It means 90% of our people are not on medical aid. They are not covered. So when they need any medical attention, they have two options. Either to look for cash,
right, or
to suffer in silence,
right,
which is a very difficult situation as a country, honestly speaking. We have a low uptake, low penetration of medical aid in Zimbabwe. Although strangely, you could be interested to know that we have more people on funeral cover than on medical aid cover.
What in your opinion contributes towards that kind of an anomaly?
I think maybe it's a tradition issue, a culture issue.
Well, that death is certain.
Death is certain,
right,
but you would want to ask yourself, do you want to live well or you want to be buried well?
Right, right.
So my take is I would rather have people be on medical aid than on funeral cover. Because look, I mean, realistically speaking, when someone dies, traditionally as Zimbabweans, we are bound to come together and help each other out, carry the funeral burden. But like I said earlier, the statistics are not looking too well in terms of our coverage.
Right.
We have only 10% of our population on some form of medical aid cover, but of course more on funeral cover. So people are having to resort to other means of accessing healthcare services whenever they have a medical emergency.
Right. Before I touch on to some of the economic implications, I do also want to acknowledge that our 10% reach for medical aid currently in Zimbabwe definitely is alarming. What is our comparative position just within the region? Is this a normal figure within the region, or?
No. If you look at it in the context of our region, we are way low.
Right.
Yes, yeah. Well, other countries within the region have registered a higher uptake of medical aid schemes as opposed to our scenario. And of course, various reasons can be proffered for that. In our case, it's an economic issue.
Right.
Right now, we have people, our formal sector is shrinking by the day. We have most of our working class sitting in the informal sector. We have more hustlers than officially or formally employed breadwinners. So given that scenario, you then find that what becomes their priority in life are bread and butter issues, not medical aid, which is a safety net mechanism, which is a social security scheme. So one would make money, good money or bad money, but they still make money. But what would they think of in the first instance?
Right.
They think of bread and butter issues at home. So medical aid and other insurance products, they remain in the back burner for most of our population in Zimbabwe. Okay. Whereas if you find in the region, they have more formal employers and employees who take up medical aid scheme on behalf of their employees. Yeah, fine. Even in Zimbabwe, we do have that scenario, but the formal sector is shrinking. We have a few companies that are operating, and they have medical aid as a benefit to their employees.
Right.
Yeah.
So appreciating, of course, and I appreciate that clarity in that, because we've got a majority informal sector, compliance towards medical aid is also going to be limited. Let's look closely at that 10%. What's the uptake of that 10%? How many of those who are within formal employment are actually accessing medical aid services?
Not everyone.
Right.
Not everyone. And this is because if you look at the way employers in the formal sector structure medical aid as a benefit, you are giving it as a benefit, and you have a contribution, you have a portion that you contribute as an employee. So one then looks at it and they do their math and say, okay, fine, if the employer is going to pay 50% of my medical aid subscriptions, I'm meant to come in with 50%. And then if you do the math, you then realize, okay, fine, there is the principal member, there is their spouse, assume 2 children. That portion that they're meant to contribute may also seemingly be heavy on them.
Okay.
And then they may actually opt out of medical aid scheme, even though the employer has offered them that as a benefit.
Right.
But of course, there are various complications that come in with that kind of an arrangement, because the employer will say, no, look, we've provided medical aid cover for you. You are refusing to take it. Whenever you are in a medical emergency, please don't really bother us asking for a loan to take care of your spouse or your child. Yes.
We'll take a short break and be right back with more Economic Forum. Stay tuned. Welcome back to the second segment of Economic Forum, where we're discussing all things relating to the economy, and today with a particular focus on medical aid, essentially rather, in light of COVID-19. Currently joined in studio by independent medical aid consultant Joseph NGANI. Now, Joe, before we took the first break, you were highlighting some of the disproportions that we find with the informal sector and the formal sector and access to medical aid. We also appreciated that the economy does have an effect on access to medical aid. I do want to bring in a significant aspect of availability of funds. We went through a period where we'd use local currency, I'll simplify it as that, and US dollar currency. And briefly, just give us an understanding of what that shift was like for the medical aid industry, but also the implications that it had on the market in general.
Okay. What we need to start from is a base where we get to appreciate the economic dynamics that are involved in the healthcare services sector. Right? For starters, healthcare service providers, some of the consumables they use is imported. Right. Fine, we have local skills. We have equipment and machinery and consumables, which then have to be imported into any medical facility. So you'll have on one side a healthcare service facility having to incur costs in foreign exchange. They have to import their supplies. But then how do they recover their costs from their patients through the medical aid societies? So they're faced with 2 options really. one, either to levy their services in foreign currency,
Right.
or they levy their services in local currency, but of course we have to appreciate the inflationary dynamics that are obtaining in our country.
Right.
It then becomes even more expensive for the local patient or even for the medical aid. So like you rightly pointed out, we then saw a situation where medical aid societies were devised ways to cushion that challenge by having a two-tier product arrangements where you could have a set of schemes that are paid for in local currency,
Right.
and then other schemes that are a parallel scheme that will then be paid for in hard currency. So members then have an option to say, okay, which scheme should I go for? Do I go for a local currency product,
Right.
or I go for a foreign denominated
Right.
product?
Right.
That then means you could have two sets of members on one medical aid scheme. One group paying in local currency and another group paying in foreign currency. But they will all seek services at one particular service provider.
Right.
But when you are on the ground, you are then faced with a situation where card A may get certain services up to a certain level. But someone who's got a medical aid scheme that is paid for in hard currency will probably get full board services.
Right.
So it then presents a set of dynamics that we then have to educate members to say what better option would you rather be on, given your own dynamics as a family. That's where we come in and advise our members and say, we do a risk analysis and say, okay, your corporate arrangement is you're employing a fairly large employee base or you're employing a fairly elderly employee base. So those risks
Right.
are evaluated differently.
Okay.
For instance, you find that a company or an employer or a family which is generally young and they're still making babies, they have a different set of demands on the healthcare services,
Yes.
as opposed to, let's say, a middle-aged family where they are in their 40s and they're chasing 50s. Then there's another category, the above 60s.
The prescriptions category.
Yes, where people who carry a lot of chronic conditions.
Right.
Yeah, and in fact, for your own information, statistics will show you that children below the age of 7 and seniors above 65 actually are overburdening the healthcare delivery services because of their risk profile.
Right.
Yes. So we now come in and analyze those issues and say, okay, how many young children are on your membership base or in your family or in your company, and how many elderly employees do you have? So those things now point
All those
to
come
where
together.
we will then suggest which medical aid product you want to have,
Right.
because of your risk factors.
Talking about medical aid products, there have been some innovative approaches that have been taken by various health institutions to, I guess, maybe somehow mitigate the issue of medical aid, where you would find that there would be a hard currency monthly component that could be made to an actual health institution, which would give you the benefits of medical aid cover, but limited, of course, that institution. Tell us a bit about some of those innovative approaches that are being taken, but also how effective they would be to the market.
Oh yes, it's quite an innovative approach to healthcare services where certain funds are channeled to a particular healthcare service center. It's all well and good. Why? Because it gives you assured access to that particular facility when you fall ill and you need medical attention.
Right.
But of course, there's always a flip side to some of these things. The question will be, let's say you are in distress out of town. You have traveled on holiday or on business. You have subscribed to a hospital based in your own local city, but then for some reason or another you have traveled and that facility is not located in the place where the distress call happens. So you then want to look at that as well. But in a nutshell, yes, it's quite an innovative way where people channel their funds towards a particular healthcare facility so that they are assured their access. But of course, there's also another dimension to that where you then ask yourself to say, are you then not restricting yourself to that particular service provider? Because you want to catch yourself in or close yourself in, lock yourself in one particular service provider, assuming then they have full board services. It's all well and good. But what if they don't have one particular service that you are going to need during your point of need?
Would it be fair to assume, Joe, based on your comment there, that it would seek to be able to address, as you brought out clearly, the overburdening demographic of the health services, that being the really extremely young and the elderly because of proximity? Would that be more beneficial in that particular setting?
Yes, for the largely risky member of our population, yes, that's an ideal situation.
Right.
Because look, if you're looking at a child who's below 7, their chances of mobility outside town is limited, unless of course they're taken away by their parents, or even the elderly, they're largely in their home territory.
Right.
So in that case, it's all well and good. But for middle-aged members who are mobile and are all over the place, it then might present a few challenges here and there when you fall sick out of town.
Right.
But yes, for the largely higher risk population, it may be ideal to have that kind of an arrangement, because all you then need to do is to just have a transport arrangement from home to that particular service center which you have a deal with, and you get your medical attention.
Okay. Very briefly before we take our second break, I also want to be able to understand from your experience in terms of engaging medical aid institutions, where do we currently stand with access to benefits in light of COVID-19?
Oh yes, that's a very good question, because on one end, someone has medical aid cover, all well and good. The question that we'll then ask next is, what sort of package are they on?
Right.
Is it a lower end package or is it an upper end package?
Got it.
So if one is on a lower end package, which essentially means you have access to healthcare services at public facilities, whereas the other side of the scale, someone is on a top end product, they have access to private healthcare facilities.
Right.
So you have two different people who are on medical aid but accessing different facilities.
Okay, we'll expand a bit more on that after this break. Stay tuned to Economic Forum. We'll be right back with more. Welcome back to the final segment of the Economic Forum, where we discuss all things relating to the economy. My name is Farai Gwaze. Don't forget to also interact with us on our social media platforms. That's Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and YouTube. You can also send us your contributions on our WhatsApp number. Feel free to send us your questions, comments during the course of the program. Currently joined in studio by independent medical aid consultant, Mr. Joseph NGANI, looking at the significance of medical aid more essentially during COVID-19. Now, before we took the break, we're looking closely, or we touched rather, on the benefits of medical aid during COVID. I only bring it up because it does seem to be a cause of concern when medical aid serves the purpose of meeting you halfway, as you clearly put out at the beginning. If there was ever a time when being able to access the best possible health services, it would be now.
Yes, definitely. Look, even if before COVID, there was already a red flag, as it were, in as far as the need for medical aid is concerned.
Right.
But now it's been compounded by our reality that COVID is here. And as the current pointers show, we don't know for how long we're going to be under COVID.
Right.
But having said that, there is no other time that one can overemphasize the need for some form of medical cover than now.
Right.
Because the cost of healthcare services is heavy. So if one is not on medical aid, it becomes a very challenging situation. Assume you are faced with a COVID-related complication as we speak.
Yes.
What is your fallback position? Where do you go? Where do you get access to your healthcare services to attend to your challenges? You then want to answer that question without any measure of doubt.
Right.
So definitely we can't do without medical aid.
Yeah. How do we address the perception that may be there around COVID, in the sense that despite how much money you have, how much access to you have, it can still directly affect you, but that there should not be a position to deter someone for putting whatever measures are significant to be able to assist them?
Medical aid is not really for the sick or the unwell or the vulnerable or even the rich. Medical aid is for everyone, and right now we're talking about COVID with us. COVID doesn't select your wealth status, as it were. It just hits anyone as long as you're exposed. It then gets to you. So definitely you would want to have someone having to consider seriously that they have to be on some form of medical aid.
Right. Well, I'm also looking at the high cost of effective COVID-19 testing. Has the medical aid institutions come up with a way to be able to mitigate that? Are they meeting us halfway with our COVID tests?
Yes. I've seen a couple of medical aid societies who have come up with measures to assist their members with both COVID testing as well as mitigation against any COVID-related complications.
Right.
Yeah, and I'm also happy to note that there are some medical aid societies who are currently saying they are putting in measures that assist members import vaccinations. You see, so I've seen medical aid societies coming up with different measures that are coming in to mitigate against the effects of COVID, as well as cushioning their members.
Right. So if you say, highlight again, you say import vaccinations. This would be, once again, appreciating that, of course, I think 1.2 million doses of vaccination have been made available by the government.
Yes.
And the initial rollout, I think, from the 18th of March took place, and we're now currently in the second phase. But this is access to the general public and is freely available. However, you are also open to be able to want to access your own vaccination if you'd want to?
Yes.
Please tell us a bit about that. Yeah.
I'll tell you what I've noticed in the market is there is a general sense of skepticism. Right. People are asking more questions than the answers being provided.
Sure.
I say this from the fact that you'll get people still asking questions to say, is the current vaccination available safe?
Right.
So there are safety issues that people have to deal with. There are safety concerns that we have to address, and there are also trust issues that we need to address as a nation. People are asking, is the drug that is available safe for me and my family?
Right.
So it's a confidence issue. It's not an availability issue. It's a confidence and trust issue.
Okay.
So now, medical aid societies that I've noted, a couple of them, we have said, okay, we can make arrangements to bring in vaccinations for the pool of our members.
Right.
So for me, I see that as a noble initiative, and also helps us build confidence in getting our jabs from wherever we are, whether you are in Harare, Mutare, or Bulawayo, wherever. You then have that confidence to say, oh, okay, will my medical aid society get me exposed, or they'll want to protect me?
Right.
So I think it's going to go a long way when effectively the medical aid societies roll out that facility for their members. Yes, granted, it might be a closed benefit, because they'll be saying we're importing it for our own members.
For our own members.
It's not anything that will be available to you, whether you have the cash.
Right.
That you can just walk into a medical facility and say, can I get a jab on this?
Right.
So, but in a nutshell, we are seeing great initiatives, noble initiatives from some medical aid societies who are coming up with measures to import vaccinations on behalf of their members.
Okay. Now, before we do close our discussion, if you could also just maybe give us a bit more of an appreciation of why it is important now more than ever to, one, be able to access medical aid, but also in light of the current COVID-19 epidemic.
The benefits are numerous, Farai. Look, for starters, it's expensive not to have medical aid. Because with medical aid, you are putting away a bit of money once at a time. But when a medical emergency falls, whether it be COVID-related, or it's some illness, food poisoning, or it's a road traffic accident, either way, you still need medical aid. So yes, definitely I would encourage people to be on some form of medical aid. And again, you also want to be in control of your healthcare needs. You know, you don't want to be vulnerable when you are exposed, and then you have to start asking around, can I phone Uncle Farai for $100 loan for me to attend to this problem? So it then becomes a case of a challenge. You are dealing with two issues, health and the economics of the day. Definitely people will need to be on some form of medical aid, because the benefits are numerous.
No, Joe, thank you so much for your insights. Always appreciate having a discussion with you. We definitely look forward to following up with the state of the medical aid sector in future.
It's my pleasure. It's good to be here, and thank you for having me.
That's it. My name is Farai Gwaze. That's all the time that we do have here today on Economic Forum. Don't forget to also follow us on our social media at Economic Forum Zimbabwe, and also send us your WhatsApp contributions during the course of the discussion. Have a pleasant viewing, and God bless and good night.